Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
In movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, it's given away by the title, really. I'm here to talk off the stories of films, and I tend to talk about production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all those ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. Now, what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their latest film or their body of work, and you get a little bit of both in this particular special episode. I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Catherine Hardwicke, a film director, a screenwriter, a production designer in her earlier career as well. And we're here, first and foremost, to talk about her latest movie, the comedy Mafia Mamma, which is out in UK cinemas from the 17th of November 2023. Also, throughout the course of the conversation, we talk about a few other movies in there. 2015's Miss You Already gets picked up a little bit. We go back to Twilight. We talk about 2003's 13 as well. But also, just in terms of setting the scene, we do touch upon Catherine Hardwicke's career as a production designer as well, and working with directors such as Cameron Crowe and Richard Linklater and David O. Russell. She'd worked on films such as Three Kings, 2 Days in the Valley, Tank Girl, Tombstone, and so that comes up a little bit. But I think that's all you really need to know going into this conversation. I'm going to set it up with a clip from the trailer for Mafia Mamma, and you'll get my conversation with Catherine Hardwicke the other side of this.
I have terrible news. Your grandfather is dead.
I don't even know him.
They want me to fly to Rome tomorrow night to settle his affairs. I mean, shouldn't I stay here and work on my marriage?
Kristen?
Start thinking about you.
I landed safe in Italy.
The Colosseum.
Oh, what? Where is it? Can we go back?
We have to go to the funeral.
What did my grandfather do? What is going on?
My dying wish is that you be the new boss of the Balbano family.
I've got a lot going on at home. My son just went to college and my husband just cheated on me.
You want me to take care of him?
No.
That then was a clip from Mafia Mamma. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined for this Film Stories podcast special by its director. It's only Catherine Hardwicke. Hello, Catherine Hardwicke. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you very much. Just before we came on, I was admiring your very lovely house, which I am intending to crash and steal at some point. I should acknowledge this up front just in case it comes up in court. You've made I'm going to start with Mafia Mamma, if that's all right. You've made an R-rated comedy headlined by a brilliant woman from the director of a global sensation. And on paper, once upon a time, that strikes me as the kind of film that should have been really easy to make and very easy to get through the system. But I'm kind of guessing it wasn't. And I'm just wondering if you can kind of take us into that a little bit.
Well, as you know, the most right now, people will love being happy to greenlight a big action movie, a thriller, a horror movie, or anything based on a famous IP or superhero stuff. So getting the movies about a friendship between two women, a woman that's kind of coming into her own, those are just always going to be more challenging. There's no question about it. And then that's what we have to figure out. How do you connect to audiences? How do you let audiences know about this kind of a smaller movie like that when there's so many other, things with a lot of money out there? So indie filmmaking, that's what that's our goal, our challenge. Yeah.
It seems really odd to me that this is an indie film, because you've made a really enjoyable mainstream movie. I mean, the appeal to it, to my mind, is broad, and it does feel like an odd state of the industry that this has become what indie is.
Right. Well, the IP. I mean, is it based on a famous novel? Is it based on a comic book? You're trying to. Some of us are trying to get some original material out there.
Please do. I like the fact you take the piss out of a famous novel. That certainly ticks that box. I won't spoil that for anyone who's not seen it. I also like the fact that you've made a film who the antagonist is basically insecure men with lots of money, and presumably to try and get films made. I mean, it writes itself by this point. So when did it come into your life? Because I read it was Toni Collette who brought this to you. I'm just wondering, can you take us into that first conversation?
Yes. I mean, I had done a movie in London with Toni Collette, starring Toni and Drew Barrymore and Patty Considine, great cast.
Yeah.
So Toni and I just got along like, house on fire. We had so much fun together. And then a few years later, she sends me this. Hey, do you want to go to Rome and do this crazy, wacky comedy? I'm like, of course, because there's no one more joyful to work with than Toni. I mean, she just loves life, and in Rome she wakes up every day and walks like 5-mile loop around the Colosseum and the Forum. Let's go to work, let's go eat pasta. She was just in a way like this character. She had just more or less broken up with her husband, and now she went to Rome and had this whole new lease on life. So it was beautiful.
And was it the wacky comedy bit as well that kind of appealed to your head?
I really like that. I like the idea of getting to be creative. I mean, in Miss You Already, written by fabulous British writer Marina Banks, that had some beautiful comedy and chemistry between Toni and Drew. So you saw the female friendship, and here we had with Monica Bellucci, Toni Collette, we had the great female friendship. And also the fact that this is a woman that nobody really saw her. They didn't listen to her. They didn't really hear her voice. Her husband didn't really appreciate her. Her son didn't. Her co-workers certainly didn't. And so finally she, throughout the film, she finds a way to own her ideas and her voice and transform the vineyard and do cool things and be a boss,
Yeah. I mean, I've been following your career for a long time, and there's comedy that runs throughout quite a lot of your film work. But this strikes me as the first time you've gone very overtly into it. And the reason I just wanted to touch on that is that there are parts of the film, and I'm just curious how you block this, how you set this up, where you're putting so much effort as well into a background gag. It's just like I'm watching what's going on. I'm thoroughly entertained by what's going on. But you've gone to the detail of you're setting up something almost entirely different. And I don't want to go into detail and spoil it. I mean, is that part of the joy of it? Have you always had that kind of comedy itch?
I have, because actually when I first started in the film business, I was a production designer, and I got to work on quite a few outrageous comedies. And so for me, since I was designing the set, I could make the set part of the comedy, So I love doing that, layering that in. And I think, we as filmmakers, we like to build depth into a movie. Like I'm standing here, not in front of a wall. I've got a lot of depth. I've got detail behind me. Yeah. I think we like that. How many layers can you put in,
And so, but when it comes to directing it and the moving parts of that just strikes me as you're just making your job twice as difficult in what presumably was already something really quite tight and quite economic. I mean, I'm just hugely impressed by it. I read a memoir by Gary Marshall years ago, and he spends about 2-3 pages talking about setting up a single background gag in the film. And I just find the construction of comedy, which is fairly archaic way to put it, I guess, just really, really fascinating, getting those beats right.
Yeah, I mean, the writers had put in a lot of fun details, and I was trying to honor what they did. But then you try to build on it and enhance it, make it even funnier, And that starts with the casting, getting the right characters for the two bodyguards. They were like really lovely characters. I think that might be one of the scenes you're talking about.
Yes, I'm going very spoiler light on it, but it's just like, you're watching it, you just think someone's really putting a shift on this. The other thing that really struck me is I talked to quite a lot of indie filmmakers, and they tell me no matter what amount of money you get to make a film, you make it look like 3 times more expensive than you've got. And of course, you've got this extensive background in architecture as well as production design. You just dropped in a casual sentence there about I designed the set, for instance, which isn't the usual thing I get in a director interview. Can you talk about that, about getting the look of this film right? Because again, it just strikes me someone's put in an awful lot of work to do this and just get it to match the tone. Yeah, I mean, we had a lovely Roman production designer, and she knew a lot of beautiful things. But we also, in my mind, I did want to imagine that this mafia family had aesthetic ambitions too, that they were more tasteful than maybe other mafia families. And they had a little bit of design skills and things. And so we found like gorgeous villas, that had been there for 500 years, and that the Pope spent the night in that villa, and they had gorgeous like vineyards outside the villas and caves and, everything. As we know, Italy is just drop dead beautiful architecture. Yeah. And so being able to film in some of those places that have, 2-foot thick stone walls, and then have, had heart and soul and life, for 500 years. I mean, that you just feel it in the wine cellar, in the winery. It's ancient, it's gorgeous. There's so many stories there. And I mean, it's an intangible question away, but you've touched on something I was going to ask you about. It's just, are you the kind of person who walks into a place and you just get that feeling that you just know, that you get a sense that there's more to the building than just what we're looking at sometimes? Oh, yes. And in fact, one of the main villas that we shot in, like almost every detail had so much, like in the wine cellar, there was a part of the wall that was kind of eaten away, and there was an elephant tusk from 15,000 BC found there, and you're just like, okay. And during the war, the Nazis occupied that same villa, stole all the wine, and stole the second tusk, for example. So like almost everywhere you went, there was another deep story, a beautiful story. And in the scene where Monica and Toni are stomping on the grapes, that is on the Appian Way. The stones were there, on the ground for the Appian Way with carvings, so it's just incredibly layered in Rome. It's filming around Rome. You have so many beautiful details. Yeah. I mean, again, I wish almost the pictures were going out in this podcast so we could see just the passion on your face as you're talking about this. Are you a filmmaker who's far more at home on location than you are on a soundstage? Is that kind of your happy place? I do love locations, great locations like this. But since I'm a builder, I'm an architect, I like to build things too. So, and building something, you can take the yummiest details from everywhere and bring it into the set and have new artisans create that stuff. So I love both. Yeah. Because I think it was when he was making Minority Report. I think it was Steven Spielberg who observed, if you're making a film in the future, you set it in the buildings that you're in now, because we've lived in them for 100 years. And it strikes me you're almost doing a kind of a similar thing there, but for different ends, that you're tapping into just kind of whatever you're feeling that was in there in the first place. Right. Now, I love modern architecture too. So like in Miss You Already, we have a lot of modern architecture because London has such great stuff. And, in London, I love the mix. I love the, juxtaposition and the contrast,
I love both in a way.
That's a nice position to be in. I mean, it's the other point I made just about maximizing the budget and making it look a bigger film than perhaps it may look like on an Excel spreadsheet or whatever film accounting is done on there. You do a funeral scene, and the funeral scene, I'm just looking at it. It's fairly early in the movie, so I think I can talk about this. And it's just swimming with people. I always think people are the best visual effects, really. That if you bring quite a lot in, you've got your special effects moment that a computer can't do. But when you get, presumably it gets to a point where you've got a screenplay and a bunch of resources. How over time have you got savvier, I guess, about knowing where to spend your money, about knowing where to put your big scenes, your big moments?
Yes, and I think you're absolutely right. A lot of times you want to put something up front so that people feel like, oh, this is a big budget movie. They don't see the pain of low budget. And once you ease into that, you go, oh yeah, this is a real movie. Then you have more intimate scenes later where you don't have all those extras. But then we also learn how to stage the extras to make them look like more than they're are, people close to the camera. We have a lot of cool drone shots there,
You do?
It's very carefully kind of designed to make it feel as much depth, as much layers, as many people as you can feel. And then we got a lot of we had a real choir, a local choir. And so in church, they're singing that beautiful song for real in a real beautiful old church. So it feels like the real deal because it is. I was like almost crying that day when they were singing that song. It was just a beautiful experience. Yeah.
I mean, you've been directing feature films and television for 2 decades now. I'm just kind of curious. Had this film come at the start of your career, do you think you would have approached it in a different way? Do you think it's required the skill set you've built up in that time to be able to realize just what you did?
Well, definitely, I've learned a lot of techniques and tricks and simple things like how do you have in my office in Rome. I had everything on the walls. I had my little storyboards. I had all the visuals. And so every meeting that I would have all the department heads would come in there and then they could see visually, like even in my office, I have everything up on the wall.
Oh, look. I mean, I'm appreciating people can't see this. There is a wall with just a flood of very nicely organized and lined up pictures as well. There's nothing scattergun on that wall. Just like almost to the angle that's beautiful.
Yes. Thank you. Well, like we kind of create this whole world that we're in, and how do you get all your department heads on the same page so we can maximize the shooting days, and I've learned techniques that work better and don't work better, how to communicate with everybody, on a board or like with a model and show people this is how we can film that action sequence. We only have 3 days. A big movie might have had 2 weeks to do it. We've got 3 days. We're going to approach it like an army, I literally have army men showing where this one's going to stand here. This one's going to stand here. So a lot of fun techniques of learning how to be prepared to shoot on a tight budget, tight schedule.
Yeah. And how early do you bring your collaborators in on that? So you've shown us, you've visually shown us this wall of information. At what point in the process are you comfortable sharing that? Do you have to get it straight in your head first, or do you open the door from the start?
Well, yes, I do get it straight in my head first, but usually you only have X number of weeks of prep. Like maybe the cinematographer is only allowed for 3 weeks of prep. And so the day that he's going to land in Rome, I want to be ready for him. I want to have as much figured out as I can, but I never hold back. Like I always show people my shot list, my storyboards, my visuals, and then they can collaborate and jump in there with me. And, oh, that's a good idea, but let's do this. Let's make it better by this,
So you're not running your sets via fear or tyranny or anything like that. It's very much an open door kind of meritocracy you're looking for.
Well, you try, but then on the shooting day, you do have to be pretty concentrated and focused because you can't have too many wild ideas when it costs $100,000 a day or whatever. So hopefully you got those ideas out in prep before you get to the moment of roll camera,
Yeah.
Sometimes people have great ideas on the day, and the actors say, I could run over here and do this. Cool, let's try it,
I mean, I'm going quite granular on stuff like this because hopefully some people who listen to this podcast are trying to make a film. And I find your career path really fascinating, that you worked your way through a crew first before you got to direct a feature. And the answers I get to questions like this from directors who jumped in their 20s, for instance, to direct a feature are very different, actually, to what you're saying. And it's why I wonder if just kind of that experience of your production design work, of the films you were working on, by the time you sat in a director's chair, you were more than ready for it by the sounds of it.
Yes. And also, I think that's a great point that you just had. Because I was a department head before, I understood a little bit about communication and lack of communication. And I tried to maybe overly communicate, or not overly, but be sure everybody has the information, because I knew as a production designer, if the director took a really long time making a decision, it made my job and everybody's job so much more difficult. If they could have just said, yes, we're going to shoot at that bank, then I could have started making that bank work instead of spending double the money, so I try to understand the idea. When I have an instinct, let's go ahead and choose that location. Don't put it off, or choose the wardrobe, think ahead, prepare for it and communicate and let people know that they can go and do their job. I think that's definitely from being on the other side, And
how does it change the difficulty level? I mean, you talk about Miss You already, where you come and make the film in London. I presume it was raining, always seems to be. But here you're presumably shooting in Rome with I read the credits, Italian crew, Italian cast. I don't know how good your Italian is, but I'm as much as there are upsides to that, does that bring with it slight difficulties as well?
Well, that's invigorating to go to, for me, going to London or going to Rome. Both of those cities have insane architecture. As an architect in London, I'm just like, it's a visual feast. Rome is a visual feast. Now I have to kind of curate it and edit it, but you have gorgeous things to choose from, so that's fun. And also working with a British crew, working with an Italian crew, they're going to bring cool things and ideas that I never would have thought of, because that's where they live. Oh, how about this? Oh, we do this kind of funny thing. They could eat this cake, or,
I mean, I don't want to put either of us in mortal danger as well. One of the things I noticed in the end credits was I've 6 different credits for legal services right at the end of it. I don't know if it was like 6 different production companies, each had their legal cover on it. But I'm just curious if that kind of gives an insight into, again, a small independent film, small with just on a cost basis, and the individual little pressures that perhaps we as the audience don't see when you see things like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, it is interesting because you have, multiple people coming together instead of just one legal services at Warner Brothers, but now we have 3 companies that put in money, or 6 companies that helped in some way get the movie made. So they want to credit all their people too, So it's fascinating. The producer, Chris Simon, he has to kind of keep everybody happy, pull it all together,
It is the weird thing with an indie film, I guess, that suddenly you've got triple the amount of bosses for a smaller production. But again, I mean, by the sounds of it, you almost savor that a little bit.
Well, hopefully, I mean, in this case, the entity, all the different companies, they were excited about the project. They were very supportive. I mean, sometimes people might be going through their own stress with their company that has nothing to do with you, and that stress can transfer to you. But that could happen at a studio too, because people get fired from the studio. So in every case, you have to somehow try to stay as positive as you can and keep people like, hey, this is a fun idea. Like, show them a cool picture. We're going to go here. Give me like a few more pennies so I can have this better location. We're always trying to sell the financiers on our ideas and sell everybody on the concept,
We should note as well that with this film, you really went for it. I mean, there are. I think I remember there was I think it was a Hugh Grant mafia comedy, which a perfectly serviceable film, like about 15, 20 years ago. On the mafia bit, it kind of pulled back a little bit. Yours is proper violence. You're full on. You're not messing around. It's just like you're giving us a comedy, you're giving us a plot, and you're giving us brutal mafia stuff, right down to the font. You've got to love a good font. And I just, I presume I presume again a slight cover of an independent film perhaps, but I presume these were non-negotiables for you. You've certainly hinted at it in previous interviews. It's just like if you're making a mafia film, if you're making a mobster film, I mean, you've got to go for it.
Go for it. I mean, I love, Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino. Yeah. And I relish, those moments that I'm just like absolutely shocked in a movie, like, no way. Or Evil Dead 2 with the eyeball, the thing, So like, I love those movies those moments where you're like, I did not see that. So we kind of went for it in this one. And, but it was, I think in one of the scenes, it's Toni Collette's built up anger, resentment against the toxic masculinity in her life, and then she is being attacked, so she takes it out on the guy.
It's great. It was really shocking because I just didn't expect. I expect usually films to pull back at that point, particularly a comedy. It's just like you didn't get the memo. It's great. More of that. You mentioned Toni Collette there. I do just want to name check her just because obviously she's brilliant, and but not just as a comedy lead here. I always think the best comedy actors are also amongst the best dramatic actors. And I just wonder if, like, when you're directing her, that's as much key to you, because there's a lot more to this character than just I'm not using the word just, than cracking jokes and getting laughs.
Yes. I mean, I think the thing about Toni, we've seen her, I mean, literally since Muriel's wedding. Yeah. All the way through all the work she's done, she can be extremely comedic and chameleon-like and turn all different things, but she always has that heart and that soul, and she feels grounded, and she's relatable, like you feel like you know her and care about her. So Toni kind of does have it all, or can go really everywhere.
I mean, which brings us on to casting, really, because I look back at some of the actors you cast early in their career, and you're not. I mean, sometimes like you see articles about people, they cast all these people really early, and they've really caught people ahead of time. I'm looking at names like Evan Rachel Wood, Robert Pattinson, Anna Kendrick, Kristen Stewart, Emile Hirsch, people that you cast very early in their career and spotted something. You and your casting director spotted something very early on. And and they weren't at the stature that they are now in terms of scale. I mean, two questions really. Number one, I mean, do you enjoy the casting process? And number two, I mean, there's got to be some fulfillment, really. I don't know, a self-fulfillment. I don't know how to phrase it, but knowing that you spotted these people pretty much ahead of the rest of us.
It is kind of fun. I mean, one thing that was very special was Oscar Isaac's first movie is Nativity with Me.
Of course.
He had never acted in any film. And they told me when I was flying to New York, you're going to walk into a dark theater and just meet this guy and see what you think. And as soon as he came in and he did the part, he's playing Joseph, St. Joseph. I was like, no one's ever heard of him or ever seen him, but he has to be Joseph. And, he was absolutely incredible in that part. And then to see, what he's become Star Wars, Dune, and so many amazing performances, I feel very honored. I was kind of like one of his first, gigs, his first movie role was that movie. But same thing. Rob and Kristen and, Evan Rachel Wood. I mean, there's so many great people. Jeremy Renner is actually in Lords of Dogtown in a small part, America Ferrara, all these great people. So it's really fun, when you see them succeed,
Incredible. I mean, it's incredible talent spotting, really. I don't think it's something you quite get the credit for, perhaps you deserve. But also, I mean, I should note as well, when Mafia Mamma was released in the US, I didn't know this, they put you up against the Pope's Exorcist. I didn't realise that was the same weekend. What a double bill that would be. The Pope, I mean, crikey. I don't know.
Crazy.
Isn't that weird?
We don't really have, as directors, usually we don't have control when they decide to put it out, or even the trailers or the marketing or the poster. It's the companies, like, they make their best laid plans and, make the best.
Avoid any other film set in Rome. I would have thought would just be the thing. It's just like bizarre. These two films landed. So you're getting a clearer run in the UK. I'm glad to say. 13. I'm nearly out of time, but I do want to touch on this because 13 broke through at a time when it felt like independent movies could still get a spark and could still spread relatively quickly. I'm not saying they can't now, but as you hinted at the start, the film ecosystem has shifted to a point where it doesn't feel we cherish independent films and independent filmmakers and give them necessarily the limelight they deserve now. I mean, with that, I just remember the noise of it was so loud. I imported the DVD from America and just devoured the film. Incredible. For the filmmakers coming through now, I mean, are you optimistic about kind of the film world that they're coming into? Because there are young directors, brilliant young directors putting their films out on YouTube for free and stuff like that. The talent is incredible. I'm just wondering if there's anything you'd say to them just about retaining their voice and trying to get it out there.
Yeah, I do think it's an incredible time for filmmakers because we have a little, on one level, celebration of diversity of filmmakers.
Yeah.
That we are celebrating more. We are giving more women, more people of color a chance to direct films, and some people are really celebrating those voices to see new perspectives and to dive into worlds that they aren't familiar with. So on one level, that's fantastic. Now, how do you get them out there through the noise, the clutter of the big budget things and get them to be seen? That's another challenge, but we have a lot of ways to see things now, and so sometimes things don't get discovered right away and they're rediscovered 3 years later or whatever. So it is kind of the Wild West, but I think that people have to just keep trying to make stories that they're passionate about, tell the stories they want to tell.
Can I ask this as well? That I don't think it's a secret. You were working in film for quite some time before you came to directing, and I mean, I'm not getting into age or something like that, but it was just a little bit further on in your career than a lot of directors start. And this is a really big thing for me because I think a lot of people think their chance has gone, that their moment has gone. The fact that you started directing when you did, I think, again, is something really overlooked in your career because Lord knows what you're having to push against to get to that far. Is there anything, too, that you could say to the people who think that their chance has gone, who think, they're in their early 30s or something and think they should have started 10 years ago?
Well, I mean, in my case, the fact that I actually worked with a lot of wonderful directors from coast to coast, Richard Linklater, David O. Russell, Cameron Crowe, I was able to be a department head, like right-hand person to all these great directors. So I could learn, I could watch. What are they doing? How did that director talk to an actor? How did he or she get that cool performance? And that way, when I got to make my first movie, I had kind of all that knowledge. Yeah. Plus, went to film school for a year, plus making my little short films, taking my acting classes, everything. So I could use all that so that my first film actually did come out very strong. Won prizes all around the world, Sundance, blah, blah, blah. Went to London Film Festival, all the awesome things.
Yeah.
So, and it gave me, and then I got another job after that, where some people in my own film school made their first movie, didn't really work out, and then they had to pivot to another career. So, everybody has a different path. And if you have gained all the knowledge you have in your life, living your life up to that point, and you've been like working on your skill sets, taking photography classes or cinematography classes, taking acting classes, writing classes, all those things can help you make a great first movie at any time, I think, in your life.
And if I can ask one more thing before I'm chucked off, that another of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you, I've never interviewed a film director who's made, if I got this right, a biblical story, They've started a global phenomenon. I only watched Twilight for the first time last week. I've really enjoyed Twilight. I gather it's quite popular. An erotic thriller, a broad comedy, a skateboarding movie. I mean, your refusal to be pigeonholed is quite something. I'm almost scared to ask what's next. Is it going to be an erotic skateboarding movie or something? Are you going to start mashing them all up?
Well, one of the projects I have up on my walls is one of the first female serial killers, 1641 in Rome.
Right.
A true story, true crime from the 17th century. That could be pretty wild. One of them is about Diane Warren, who was the 14-time nominated songwriter, and she bullied and put down as a child that she had no musical talent, and now she's her catalog is worth as much as the Beatles catalog, so amazing, like, stories of resilience. And I've got some crazy projects that we just got to get the money, we got to get the SAG strike over and get back to work. So
And is the enthusiasm you're showing me now basically the same enthusiasm you had when you were first on a film set, and stepping into this industry for the first time?
Oh yeah, I mean,
I love it.
We just had a reunion for one of the first movies I was a production designer for, a skateboard movie called Thrashin', starring Josh Brolin. And of course, I just remember every second of going out and painting those walls and graffiti this and all the crazy things I had to do when I first landed in Hollywood. It's still super fun,
Catherine Hardwicke, this has been a delight. Congratulations on Mafia Mamma. Congratulations on your lovely house, which I shall be bringing pizza to in due course. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. And that was indeed Catherine Hardwicke, the director of Mafia Mamma, that's now available in the UK. It also brings to an end this latest episode of Film Stories. And as always, thank you so much for listening and thank you for your time. If I've not bored you completely, then you can find me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Simon Brew. You can find the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Film Stories Online, on YouTube, youtube.com/Film Stories. If you go to patreon.com/Simon Brew, then you can support what we're up to as well. Likewise, if you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, that's where you'll find all of our print magazines for sale and our new Blu-rays as well. But I think that'll do for now, won't it? I will be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. Until then, you all look after yourselves. You all take care. Thank you for listening. And I'll be back soon. Bye-bye.